Welcome, guys. Thanks for coming. My name's Peter. I work at a company called backcountry.com. If you guys aren't too familiar with it, it's like REI, but online only for now. So we sell an assortment of outdoor goods, and really like our mission is just to enable people to have the best outdoor experiences possible. And that's why we sell them the gear that we sell them. It's quite a bit higher quality and specialization than something you'd find at Dick's or even REI itself. So we're really focused on giving everybody the absolute best gear so they can have the best outdoor experience possible. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about myself. I graduated with a degree in information systems from BYU and started working actually immediately out of college at Backcountry. And I was there for about 4 years and got really familiar with their business from the analytics standpoint and finance. And then I went over to a company called Skullcandy. They make headphones, and I got a lot more e-commerce management experience. I ran their websites for them. And then came back to Backcountry 2.5 years ago. When I heard about the program that we're going to review today, I was really interested in being a part of this because they're changing the way that traditional e-commerce is done online. And Sugar CRM has been a huge part of that for us. So again, I've been there a couple of years now, and it's been a huge transition from where we were to where we are today. And the way I'm going to do this, I'm just going to run through these slides here, maybe take 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then we can use the rest of the time for any Q&A you guys might have or discussion that we want to have. So for a few years, we had this idea that it's always very hard to compete with some of the bigger brick and mortar guys or people like Amazon. You've got that Amazon model, which is just very much about selection, price, and fulfillment. And then the customer service side, well, the rest of the industry is caught up to that, right? And so it's hard to compete against someone who's just focused on price and has an enormous volume. I mean, it's just next to impossible. So we started looking at different ways that we could service our customers to differentiate ourselves from Amazons and other large retailers. And what we found was what they can't replicate is the expertise that we can provide, right? They can sell the same product, but they can't sell it with that relationship and a deep understanding of the actual activity the customer's going for. Why one product might be better than another for a specific situation. It's not necessarily about the price it's really about understanding how it's going to be used. And so we started to create a sales team. And it was really the relationships that were the most important part, that trust that we built with the customers. But we started off in kind of a pretty bad way where we were using a shared Excel doc. It wasn't even a Google Doc, it was just on a drive, and so somebody could open it and edit it and save it, and then somebody else could go in and do the same. This was prior to me starting, by the way, so I don't take credit for that one. Then they went to a Google Doc format, so everyone kind of started following their customers in their own unique way. And about the time I came on board, they had just signed a contract with Zendesk, which is a really great company. I love Zendesk. But their tool really isn't set up to be a relationship management tool. It's a ticketing system. And so what we saw was kind of a step back from the relationship that we had with our customers and a bigger focus on the tasks that we were performing, right? So we were really focused on, like, anytime a customer places an order, follow up with them and talk to them about it. If they write a review, thank them. If they ask a question on a product, go answer it immediately via email and on the website. So we really started to focus quite a bit on their actions. I would say to the detriment of the relationship that existed with the customer. And this isn't to knock Zendesk. I think it's a phenomenal tool. But again, our implementation was so heavily focused on what are the things that you're actually doing as opposed to what relationship are you generating with the customer. So we were on that system for about 6 months, and I started telling the company, like, this isn't going to scale, this doesn't work. It's really not built for what we're trying to do with it. It's not a CRM. And so we moved away from this kind of rote task, like call, email, follow up at this time, and we moved much more toward meaningful conversations. So we didn't drop some of the key things that we were doing. We retained a lot of the opportunities and alerts that we had created originally. So if a customer placed an order, we still notified the sales team about that order coming through, especially if they were connected to that customer. If that person was in their sales book, we let them know. If a customer asked a question, we definitely wanted to answer it. If they filed a return, that was a huge thing for us to immediately contact them and either save the sale or send them out a different product to retain them as a customer and make them loyal to our site. So those things were still incredibly important to us, along with setting up tasks at the salesperson level. So we wanted the salespeople to actually think of meaningful tasks for why they would contact their customer proactively rather than waiting for their customer to perform an action and us follow up. So we retain those two things, but the big difference for us was that we gave ourselves a much more customer-centric view of our business. So the sales portion of this is really about the relationship that we created for them. So within Sugar, we actually have access to an enormous amount of information about our customers. I'm going to show you about all the different things that we track on them that I can show you. But at a glance, we know just about everything about the person that we feel is important. I can't show it all on this slide. Our screen's actually quite a bit bigger than this in our business. But we know their preferred name. We know how old they are. We know sizing information down to their shoe size, down to their hip size or inseam. Like, we know quite a bit of information about our customers that gives us a lot of ability to tailor the sales experience specifically to them. And it was really important to us to collect all this voluntarily from our customers. So these types of pieces of information, we let customers know, like, we're going to remember this, and it just helps me sell to you better, helps me get you the right product. I'm not a sales guy, so my language around it's probably not the best. So the types of things that we see, that a seller sees are really around customer behaviors and patterns and interests. So we've given them, this is a custom integration, and this is one of the big things for us within Sugar, is it was very easy for us to create widgets using both their, trying to think of the right word here, like their standards or within their constraints. Or in this case, what we did is we just created a widget on our end, and we iframed it directly into the system, which was actually much faster for us to do and gives us quite a bit more control over what we're able to show here. So this is just customer's order history. We're pulling this in from our back end, our ERP. So you can see like what they've purchased. So we want to give you that history. And then we give them a real-time look at what's on our e-commerce platform. So we're on ATG, if you guys are familiar with it. And we pull directly in from ATG what the contents of the customer's cart look like. So if you're on the phone with a customer, you can look at it and see exactly what they're seeing right now. You can jump onto a product page with them and see it at the same time. But giving them lots of insight to really understand that customer. So you get the real time, and then you get the look ahead. So you may be talking to them about the compression socks. I bought the compression socks for a trip I took because there was a lot of flying. But these are all the things that I actually want to buy. And we give our salespeople that kind of forward look into what they're doing. We do it all within the Sugar context. The next thing we do here, so again, this is another custom integration that we built. So if you look at my order history, it can be a little deceiving in terms of what I'm interested in, because you'll see a lot of women's sports bras and bikinis and women's pants, like the stretch pants, and then like a 4-year-old's, clothing, right? So spouse and daughter, right, want to buy a lot, but it kind of throws off like who I am as an individual, right? Those aren't the things that I'm interested in. I just have to buy them. So we gave our sales team a way to track the individual passion, right? So when my sales guy is talking to me, it doesn't show up that I like, stretch pants and yoga and all that stuff. That's not mine, right? What it's really focused on is that I like men's clothing, I like biking, skiing, and climbing. Those are my main things that I'm, really interested in. We give our reps the ability to track all of that. This is another custom widget, but all of the data we capture here is fed both into Sugar as a filterable attribute, and it's also fed to some of our marketing platforms so that they can get an insight, again, beyond just the order history to see what that individual is really interested in at a personal level. And again, this took us, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to talk about the integration timelines, but it was great because we were very quick on being able to turn something like this from a design into a functional piece of software. I think it took us 3 weeks to build this, vet it, test it, and push it out to our team. Anything that goes wrong with it, we can kind of flip it off at a switch, and it's a very simple integration, especially if you use like the iframes, like I was saying. It becomes very easy. And again, what this has given us is really robust customer segmentation. So a lot of our business is weather dependent. It's seasonally dependent. The Tour de France is a huge thing for us. So as we start to track what customers are passionate about, like biking and that kind of thing, as the Tour de France nears, we can actually filter down to a list of my customers, if I'm a salesperson, find all my cyclists, and really hit them hard about the upcoming Tour de France, and then also upsell them on like, hey, while you're thinking of that, bike season's coming up. Do you have all the jerseys that you need? Do you have the goo that you need? Do you have, you need any tires replaced? Are you thinking about getting a new bike? It gives us really robust segmentation. In Utah, where I live, we get an enormous amount of snow, and we're able to segment down to our customers based on, again, passion for skiing, the state that they're in, right down to the zip code, and use that to sell more gear that they may need at that time. So some other things that kind of help us change our focus. We had tried to do some integrations with various systems to get an idea of like, well, what actions are you taking that actually result in sales? So we talked a bit about our focus became these kind of rote tasks in the beginning, and we lost track of the relationship with the customer and the objective that we were after. It was kind of losing sight of the forest for the trees. And what Sugar gave us actually was a way to aggregate all that information together and to start running some regression analysis on the behaviors that we were seeing from the sales reps all the way through to the behaviors that the customers were having. So we wanted to see, like, if I made a call, what was the impact on the sale, right? Did I sell more? Was my AOV higher? Were my units per transaction higher? Those kinds of things. By aggregating that all within Sugar and tying it to a contact record, we were able to finally see and prove to our sales reps the types of behaviors we had been pushing. We could actually see the ones that we pushed that were actually correct, and some of them that we had pushed that really didn't make a difference in the sales pipeline. So these were key actually in driving better understanding on our sales reps and getting the better behaviors that we had been kind of seeking in terms of sales. Another big thing here, so again, just talking about the integrations and the speed which we got this out. I think we signed the contract with Sugar in late May, and we deployed in early August. So we were, I think it was a 2.5-month development cycle. It was very fast, everything was very quick, and one of the biggest things that helped us get it out the door very quickly is that the way it was structured to begin with required very little code modification and much more just admin modification. So we were able to jump in and change quite a bit of the drop downs to fit what our needs were. So a good example of this is the opportunity record here. We don't use opportunities quite the standard way. We have 3 types. So we've got an opportunity, which is just an action that an unconnected customer takes, someone that no one's currently got a relationship with. And it could be one of these things up here. So a return, a question, a review. They did a group sale. They self-selected like they want to be part of the program. And then we have a concept of an alert, which is the exact same thing, but for a connected customer. So if your customer, say, returned a $3,000 bike that they just purchased, you're going to want to follow up with them and find out what's going on, because that's just an enormous amount of money we lost. And really the module modification that we were able to do within the admin console saved us an enormous amount of time and made the deployment quite a bit easier. And we really focused on tasks, opportunities, and contacts to begin with. And now we're starting to layer in this concept of accounts, which we're going to use to track, different businesses or sports clubs, those kinds of things. So I'll talk about scale in just a minute here, but prior to this going live, I think we had capped out at about 20 salespeople. We'd hit 20 and we couldn't grow anymore, and the tools weren't working to drive the optimizations that we needed, like the proper behaviors. After getting Sugar live, we immediately noticed big changes in the user's behavior and the sales rep's behavior, and it gave us way more insight into the types of activities that they were doing that led to more sales. So a good example of this is, if I go back a slide or two, this one won't work actually, I'll have to show you a task. Prior to launching Sugar, we didn't know what types of activities they were setting with their customers. So we would go live, we would follow up with somebody, but we wouldn't track what it was. Was it a gear recommendation? Was it a holiday follow-up? Was it a birthday follow-up? There was a seasonal change and you wanted to talk to them about next season's activities? None of that stuff. Since we got the structured data in Sugar, we were able to actually finally see that for the first time and then make meaningful changes to what they were following up about. So we're able to really stress, like, you should be doing gear recommendations or seasonal follow-ups. They're the most impactful to the customer's behavior, to their buying behavior. So we finally gave them the ability to really scale the program out using Sugar. And then, we've just given them a few sales tools here. These are really just to reinforce the behaviors that we want. I think that's probably the number one struggle that we have, is just getting process adoption and the data that we want. So These are a few more widgets that we built, or I think they call them dashlets in Sugar. Pardon my vocabulary here. But the tools for the sales team that we really want to do is to complete as much information about the customer as possible. So we created a dashlet and just shows you like, look, at 100%, you're about, in this case, 43% done. You're missing this person's preferred name. You may have a customer named Peter, but he goes by Pete, or Samantha wants to be called Sam. That's really important information to us because it doesn't just improve the relationship here, it improves all of our emails and any other communication we have with the customer. We make sure we call them how they expect to be called and reinforce that relationship. And then just capturing some basic things like, do you have a birthday captured for this person? Do you know what they're passionate about? What's the next task that you're doing with them? So these dashlets have really helped us to improve the behavior there. The bottom one's a little hard to see because it's kind of cut off for context. We wanted to make sure that our reps weren't overloaded on a given day. So the types of tasks that they've set for themselves, along with the opportunities that are available for them to follow up with customers, are displayed in a color-coded calendar. And so if you start to get over, say, 40 tasks for a given day, we start to notify you. It turns red to let you know, like, look, you shouldn't set anything else for this day. You're already at your maximum. In fact, you're probably not going to get to all of your stuff for that day. And again, what it's done is taken tasks which were kind of viewed negatively by the sales team, tasks to follow up with their customers. Part of the reason they were viewed so negatively is they would just mass set 500 tasks for a day and be like, there, I'm done. All my customers have tasks, I'm good. Kind of ignoring the spirit of what we were after. And we've gotten them to spread those 500 out over 2-3 months so that they can actually have meaningful conversations with their customers. And the response has been really positive on the customer side and the sales side too. And again, just talking about the reportable rep behavior. Part of this is just, our program is growing, and I'll show you how big we got and how quickly we got there, but the first day we went live with call reporting was kind of funny because we've been having all of these discussions and arguments about who's making enough calls and who's not. And to hear the reps tell it, they were constantly on the phone. They never missed their numbers. They were always, calling 70 people a day. And then we turned the tracking on. We're like, you guys average about 15 calls a day out of 8 hours. Like, you're killing us. But you guys email a ton. So we turned that live, and it's been a night and day difference in terms of just how quickly we were able to drive the behavior to actually get them on the phone and ensure that they were hitting their numbers. Now again, the point of all this is to get the objective, the output that we want, so we don't want to lose sight and just focus on the calls, but it has had a massive impact on our ability to report back to them within Sugar and say, look, you're missing your numbers as a result of not performing enough of these types of actions. If you want to make your commission, do more of this. And that's been huge for us. I got a note in here. It went from our sales team at 20 was doing 1,000 calls in a week, and it went up to 6,000 the next week after we got this call tracking live, which was huge for us. And then again, we were able to do all of this stuff while scaling very rapidly. So when we started this program, it was 12 people. We got onto Zendesk to kind of track tasks, and we were able to scale to about 20, and we started to notice some cracks appearing, right? We went live, though, like I said, mid-August last year with about 30 users, and we very quickly, within a year, scaled up to 150. So our sales team went from 2 teams to 10 teams. Our attributable revenue went from a few million to many more millions. I actually don't think I can talk about how many millions, but it grew quite substantially. The incremental revenue that was attributed to it was phenomenal. We've gotten very good anecdotal feedback from our customers, and we can actually see it in their behaviors. Like the incremental change by focusing heavily on the relationship with them has been huge. Again, focusing on, we know who you are and we know what you're trying to accomplish outside. It's not a matter of giving you a jacket. It's a matter of enabling you to have the best ski day possible. And Sugar's been a huge part of that because it's allowed us to track everything we know about the customer and what's important to them. So this will be the last slide, and we can jump into questions and those kinds of things. So again, just talking about how much data we're capturing and how this tool has scaled for us. So we have over 6 million contact records. I put customer records here, but for everybody who uses Sugar, it's a contact record. We're well over 6 million. I think we may be coming in on 7 million here really soon. 1.5 million emails at one point. We've since pulled most of those emails out and put them into our EDW, but It was handling it with 1.5 million, and then another million calls on top of that, and millions of tasks and opportunity records. So every action that they're taking, we were sending through as a filterable opportunity to talk to your customer. We're talking millions and millions of records here. And Sugar has rarely hiccuped with that kind of volume for us. So we've got a lot of dashboarding around speed, and I think we average around, I want to say like a 0.7 second response time, plus or minus 1.5 seconds at a standard deviation. So the tool's been very fast for us. We use an on-demand setup. We don't do the on-prem, but overall very good. And that really hasn't limited us from a development and integration standpoint, which I hope you saw. We've integrated a number of things, built a number of widgets, and we've got a bunch more planned here in the future. So that's my very quick slide deck. It was much quicker than I expected. So let's open it up for questions and discussion, and let me see if I can help you, if I can provide anything to you guys.
Can you tell me about the marketing platform that you actually use and how that ties in with your strategy within Sugar?
Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, sure. So you talked about a marketing platform. I'm just wondering, can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that ties in with Sugar and how do you actually use the both systems?
So we've got Adobe Campaign Manager, MCCM, I believe they call it internally, and it's really just like a drip email campaign. And so we feed over a lot of the information we have about customer passions, and we're working right now on building out better email cadence based on how often we're talking with customers. That's not live yet, but the idea here being that, look, if I've emailed you back and forth 7 or 8 times while we're going through a sale and I've called you twice, there's a good chance you don't really need to get that sale message that's coming through. So we're working on building those out here so we don't just inundate our customers' inbox and overwhelm them. Is that good? Or? Yeah. Cool. Next. Yeah.
So on a previous slide, you showed basically a customer completeness scale.
Uh-huh.
Have you been able to tie that directly to revenue? So if I move from 43% customer completeness to 65 or 70%, I see a jump in purchases? Or?
We should be able to do that. Our BI team is a little light, so we've been looking for those types of relationships. And what we found is the customer completion widget we like in the lack of data, in the absence of data. So we don't see like that's driving sales. The cases where we have seen sales driven based on things that we put into Sugar are things like if you call your customer, your conversion rate is incrementally much larger than if you email or text a customer or chat with them. Same thing with the type of task you do. So we have a whole task drop down of like, hey, I can have a general follow-up, and they're garbage. Universally, they're just really bad. If I set something like a seasonal follow-up or a gear recommendation, that's where we've seen that regression analysis come back and say, like, these types of things are actually meaningful. The completeness widget, I mean, I like it, but it hasn't achieved that type of result yet. So.
Hey, hello. So regarding customer service, now that you're focused more on a relationship rather than just the transaction, have you seen the costs of your customer service drop? For example, the number of reps you need, the number of calls for problems with your customers, now that all the workload's being made by sales reps? So
yeah,
and
I wish...
That's one question.
No, it's a great question. I wish I had my laptop plugged in so I could show you this. We created another tool in tandem with this that we call the fitting room. And what it is if you've ever seen like a product comparison feature, it's like a multi-line product comparison, and our sales reps can actually build one out for a customer. So if you call us and you're like, look, I'm going to the Andes and I don't know what I need, we'll actually outline a whole list of everything that you need. And we've seen with that, when we really have that really close interaction with you, our return rates dropped from about 26 to 8%. And anybody who works in retail knows just how bad returns absolutely murder you. So that kind of reduction for us has been phenomenal. We're just trying to get broader adoption of that tool. It's starting to pick up, but yeah, we've definitely seen changes to the customer service model. A lot fewer purchasing of multiple jackets too. So one of the big things we'd see is people would buy 3 of the same jacket because they don't know what size, they don't trust the online data. So I can actually hook them up with a rep who looks like them. Say, look, this guy wears a medium, talk to him. He'll talk you through why medium's good for you.
You had a couple questions. One, have you integrated, you're talking about email and calling, have you integrated social media touches in with
Not
your sales
yet.
reps? Okay.
No.
My second question is, can you go back to that slide? It's one of the challenges I just started 6 months ago we're having in terms of reps doing enough calling. Can you walk me through a little bit more in detail what you did here to get that behavior up?
Yeah, so some of it's like, some of it has nothing to do with technology. In fact, I'd say the biggest part of it has nothing to do with technology, which is just holding your reps accountable, right? So if you've got people who are just flouting, once you have the data, if they're just flouting the numbers, then reprimand them, I guess, fire them or put them on a PIP, something like that. That's been the single biggest thing that we've done, which is to say, like, look, these are the expected behaviors. If you don't meet them, you don't work here. Like, we need people who will do our things. The other big thing here was that I think there wasn't necessarily a malicious intent on the sales reps' part. We work with a lot younger crowd, in their 20s, early 20s tend to be our sales reps. And you'll see the ones that are a little older in their 30s tend to be just more mature about it in general. But some of the younger sales reps, I think in their head exaggerate how much they're doing. And I don't think it's malicious. They just think, look, I've made 30 calls, and when you show them the data that it's 10, they're like, oh, I thought it was more, right? So once we were able to actually show them the average time that they were on, like their handle times, and put it in a system that they were using every day, we had a lot of this data in Cisco, but they don't have access to that stuff. Once we fed it into Sugar and actually showed them, like, hey, like you're on the low end of what your team members are doing, that did a lot in and of itself to just change the behavior. So, is that detailed enough, or was there something?
Yeah, no, I'm having the same thing. Like, they're averaging like 2 conversations a day. I'm like, please don't want that.
Right. You got an 8-hour day, unless those are 4-hour calls and $1 million contracts. Like,
No, they're not $1 million contracts.
no. Yeah. So this was a particular problem for us because we're such a high volume business. So.
A couple questions. So the first one is, you had mentioned how your sales reps went from tasks and to more proactive relationship conversations, and you said you're getting better feedback from both your customers and from your sales reps. So you specifically talked about how they'd spread out their activities over a longer period of time. What is some of that feedback that you got from your reps?
A lot of the stuff that we saw from the reps, they didn't have clarity into what worked. Okay, so on the other systems we had developed for them, we never closed that feedback loop where it was like, go do these things, and then we weren't able to report back to them which of those things were successful. So essentially what they had to do was take on faith of their manager that what they were doing was working, what they were told to do was working. And what Sugar was able to help us do was to aggregate all the data together and then run a regression and come back to them and say, well, actually, you know what, we were wrong on these 3 points, right? These things that we asked you to do didn't generate the return that we expected. These ones over here actually did, right? So just by showing people who are, really self-interested in the way that their job is set up, it's all about the commission. They want the same thing as the business does, which is to just move more product out of inventory and into customers' hands. Once you could show them your commission will increase by doing these following actions, and here's stats to prove it, then the behavior changed like very dramatically.
Second question is, you mentioned building a better email cadence based on the conversations that we're having with members. How did you work that out with Sugar to design that from the email drip campaign data compared to the conversations?
We haven't yet.
Okay.
So that's in progress, and I should tell you guys, do you guys want to see a quick systems diagram very fast, if I have a pen? I'm going to show you guys this just really quick. So let's just say this is Sugar, right? And then up here is we've got another tool here. We call it Orchestrator. And then all of our various systems feed into this. The last piece of this thing is that we drive all of this data into our EDW. And that's where most of that analysis takes place. So with regard to the drip campaign, to the email campaign, the next step for us right now is we're figuring out how to get all that data into our email platform to say these events took place, don't inundate them. So we're still in the process of building it out, but it's really, we feed everything to EDW, and EDW feeds everything to all of our various systems to make sure that we don't, overload them. We may actually go to like a real time, like when those things happen, just kick it over to our email campaign. We're not sure we can handle it yet. So, any other questions, guys?
You say you have all the reps calling to your customers. Do you have reps who are on the field also? Means people outside your office calling and communicating to your customer? And
So-
if yes, how do you track them?
We're piloting that right now. We just bought an Airstream camper, if you guys are familiar with it. It's really cool looking. And we're branding it with all this backcountry stuff. We're going to take it around and actually go do events in cities. And we intend to have laptops with cell service, and then they'll be using Sugar to track what they do with their customers. We just haven't rolled that out quite yet. We have a couple different offices. So we have one in Salt Lake, and we have one up in Oregon, where we use Sugar for all of it, but no like in-field interactions quite yet.
Okay, that is not required. So your sales cycle doesn't require your person to go to your client's office or to meet your customer.
No. It's business to consumer. I mean, we're talking like a retail environment.
Clear. Thanks.
You talked about integrations into Exchange and phone systems. Did you guys build that out, or was there a third party that came in to execute that?
Yes, we built it out. Yes, there are third parties, and I wish I had paid a third party. So
You wish you had right now.
I wish I had. Like I looked at it and I was like, look, we built it one time, and it's gonna, we can expense it over the next 3 years or amortize it over the next 3 years, and it's gonna cost this much. And I underestimated it. It was way more effort than I thought. And if I had it to do over, I would have gone to RivaSoft or Grinmark or one of those guys and paid for their integration, especially around email. Email proved to be quite challenging.
Are you using Outlook as a company, or is it the Sugar email?
We use Outlook as a company. There are some reps. We track either one within Sugar, so you could send from Sugar, and it's already built into the system, and we just capture it. Or you can, what I find is a lot of reps will actually use Sugar because of the templates, and they like the templating features that allow them to insert dynamic data. So they'll send the first email out of Sugar, and then any subsequent email chain that occurs after that happens within Outlook, and we track all of it. So it's a combination of the both, but you'll find most of our reps just use Outlook pretty exclusively.
So this information right here is information you're pushing, or an example of that you're pushing from Cisco. Is that right?
We actually listen to the Finesse servers. So the Finesse
servers,
server has
okay.
like a data feed.
Right.
And so we listen to it, and when certain key things happen, we create a call record, and associate it to the proper contact and agent user record.
Okay. So knowing that Cisco offers some of that functionality as well from a visibility standpoint, what were some of your reasons why you chose to use Sugar to display that information rather than using the Cisco platform?
We were having trouble getting the data back to the users within Sugar, and so we found that the level of effort to actually create a call record and associate it to a contact record was less than to try and pull the data in real time and display it to the customers. So instead, we just chose to use what existed in Sugar. I don't see any reason why you couldn't do it the other way, but for us, we felt it was easier to create a call record and append it to the contact record.
Hey, you mentioned that you have a 0.7 second response time, and I remember talking to somebody on your team a while ago, and you have a pretty cool setup measuring that. Can you kind of walk us through how you measure those response times and kind of how you kind of measure Sugar on demand?
Yeah, absolutely. How many people here are familiar with Sumo Logic? Show of hands. All right, Sumo Logic's a really cool dashboarding tool, and I wish I had my developers here because they're a lot smarter than me around this kind of thing. But essentially what we did is we implemented a JavaScript call, I believe, in the code in Sugar, so that when anything loaded, we were sending all data back to Sumo Logic. I mean, literally everything. And then what we did is we looked for the types of calls that we wanted, right? So it was like a 200 request or something, so puts and reads is what we were looking for. And then what we do is we measure the average, and then we measure a standard deviation of that average. And then we also break it down into quintiles, I believe. So 0 to 20% fastest, this is what they look like, 20 to 40%, 40 to 60, and on. So you can see, like, when you get up to, like, say, the slowest 5%, they're all over the board, like 1 minute response times, right? But they're incredibly infrequent. So you get this very large variation at the top, but your funnel, or your bell curve for the average response time, 95% of the time, is very, very tight. And that's how we visualized it. We wanted them to understand, like, yeah, this rep did have a 2-minute response time. That sucks. And it's like 1 out of 1 million. So please don't bring it up. Which is hard to get that across to them, but they're learning, over time, like, look, if it happens once, it's fine. If it's happening to 15 reps right now and everyone's complaining about it, we may have an issue. And the nice thing about that is, I'm glad you brought it up, that's one of the main dashboards we've exposed to the sales managers and the sales reps themselves. Because anybody who's managed one of these systems knows how many user errors you get submitted as bugs. And this has cleared up an enormous number of those. We don't get nearly as many bugs filed about speed and stability as we were before doing that. I think you had a question, if I'm not mistaken.
So given you're going B2C, have you got any stats on when the best time of day to call is? Do you find that you can engage people more successfully outside of hours or during?
It's a really interesting question. First of all, there are governmental restrictions. So those are the best times not to call. Like, don't call when you're going to get arrested, right? Because there's like some laws that you can break pretty easily if you're calling customers. If you're calling them, like say 30 days, I think, after they've done something on your site, you're not allowed to call them anymore. You can call them within that window. You can't call before like 8 or 9 a.m., depending on the state that you're in. So a lot of those things we see. But you'll find it varies kind of. I can't speak to the hour, but I can certainly speak to the day. Our biggest days are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right? And then things start to tail off Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Then they kind of pick back up again Sunday. My own personal theory on this is people are getting ready for the weekend. So they're kind of, focused on that, whereas they get back to work and they're only thinking about the weekend and they're like, I want to buy more gear. So we tend to do better. Like, you'll see it a lot during like the business hours. That seems to be like when we do really well. Our cadence in sales seems to follow just a normal business day, surprisingly. I just don't think people really want to be contacted about gear past 6 o'clock. So I hope that helps. I don't have a lot of insight into that one personally, but any other questions, guys?
Did you also increase your Net Promoter Score?
Our Net Promoter Score has gone up. Actually, for the site in general, like for our brand in general, our Net Promoter Score is quite good. What we're missing right now, and this is another major component to how we pay out our sales team, their payout is dictated entirely by net margin, returns, just very much the financial numbers with very little to almost no view of a CSAT score, for instance. We don't have a customer satisfaction survey after the fact. And that's one of the things we're building out in Q4 to hopefully launch in Q1, which is like, you might push a ton of product, but if every one of your customers universally hates you and you're just churning through them, like that's just not going to work for us. So we're layering that in, and it's a great point that we're missing.
Just a little bit more conversation on that when you talked about KPIs. Mm-hmm. So, you mentioned just a couple of them. What were some of the other KPIs that you chose that you are seeing direct correlation to CRM?
Shoot, I could probably draw it out for you if you guys want another drawing. So this is how I kind of broke it down for the sales team. All right, well, fuck that thing. All right, so at the top, everything is all the same. Like, this is our objective here. So everyone's after the same thing, right? Across our entire company, everybody does everything because they want to sell more product. They want to get more product out of their out of the warehouse and into the customer's hands. So we really started focusing on things like this. So AOV was a big one. Units per transaction were a big one. Let me think. Conversion. We don't really focus so much on conversion rate, which may seem kind of weird, but it's not something very measurable in this sense. Instead, what we focused on was order frequency. So put another way, like customer order frequency. How often are you getting your customers to actually engage? What percentage of your book of business is purchasing on any given day? Those are the big things that we focused on. There's more to this. You'd see things like margin percent. We want to keep the gross margin percent at a certain threshold. When you start getting below that, the numbers start to look pretty bad, start to really hurt us. And then we were looking at returns percent. There's one other one I'm missing here. It's key. I'll come back to it because I can't think of it at the moment. And then the last step of this, so these are the KPIs we're after. The last step was down here, which was the actions. Okay, and this is where we had always traditionally struggled. There was this huge disconnect until we got Sugar in and were able to actually quantify, or codify is a better word, the actions they were taking. So talking about what type of task versus just doing a task. So we started looking at tasks, completed, and we looked at them by type. Right, so a general follow-up versus a gear recommendation became a major focus for us. We started looking at the call behavior, like when were you calling? I believe it's been looked at. We didn't see much. The duration of your call was important, and how frequently you were contacting your customers. How many fitting rooms were you creating? And again, those are like the kind of, think of going to like a fitting room and having somebody at Nordstrom's or Macy's or something coming to your fitting room and offering you product constantly, like, okay, yeah, you're going out, like, here, try this on, now do this, now do that. And we do that in real time in these fitting rooms. And so we see these actually correspond really good with a return percentage by bringing it down and actually increase the UPT as well, AOV. So we focused on fitting rooms, calls. The things that we saw, like probably the biggest jump in, were calls, fitting rooms, and then gear recommendations. Those seems to correspond the most with driving the KPIs that we want to drive more sales. It's kind of a long answer. I hope I didn't get too far off the rails. Yeah, we're actually building how am I doing on time? Good. We're in the process of building out a dashboard that looks like this. So the idea being like, what's the one thing you could stop doing to your sales team that would make them all just leave, which is don't pay them anymore, right? Everybody shows up here to get money in this situation. So what we want to show them is a graph with their goal, right? Like their dollar goal. This is how much you want to make in a month, in a week, in a year, whatever that is. And we were starting to overlay what their estimated commission looks like, right? So they can see, like, look, if I'm off, I need to really, bust my ass here in a little bit and stay in later, get in earlier, and hit my numbers, right? Versus the guy who's just doing this and crushing it, he can go on a trip, he can take a vacation, right? So we're starting to get that in front of them to give them more of the information that they need to succeed, and thereby, like, the whole program will succeed. Any other questions, guys? All right. Well, you guys, thanks for coming. If you got any questions or you want to, stay in contact, come chat with me, and appreciate all the participation.